He slid the papers across the counter with 2 fingers and tapped the row of yellow sticker tabs. Sign where the stickers are. You don't need to read it. Family doesn't keep score. 16 years I had worked in that diner. 14 years old to 30. Not one paycheck. Here is what I didn't know yet, standing there with a pen in my hand and flour still on my wrists. The government believed I had been paid the entire time. $209,000 on paper to a person who never saw a dime of it. And buried in the middle of that loan stack, under the 4th yellow tab, was one page that would have signed away a building I did not even know I owned. I put the pen down. I untied my apron. I walked out the back door with $200 and a small green notebook, and I never worked another shift in that building again. Today, I find ghost employees for a living. I audit payrolls. Companies hire me to catch the names that get paid on paper and robbed in person. For 11 years, I was one of those names. Last year, I finally read every document my family ever put my name on. And then, without raising my voice once, I made every stolen year come back to them with interest. My name is June Calloway. I am 34 years old, and this is the true shape of what happened to my family, told in the order it actually happened. If you've ever been the one your family counted on for everything and counted as nothing, if you've ever been the free labor at your own kitchen table, type the word ghost in the comments, because I want to know how many of us there really are. And stay with me, because the ending of this story is not what they expected. It is better. Sandra Mai Tingwan. To make sense of the morning I walked out, I have to take you back a long way first. This is the only jump backward in this whole story. After this, we move forward, one step at a time, all the way to a courtroom hallway and a set of keys. 16 years before the morning I walked out, I was 14 years old, and my father put an apron in my hands. The diner was called the Copper Kettle on Wayne Avenue in Dayton, Ohio. My grandmother Opal had opened it in 1971 with her husband, and when he passed, she ran it alone for a decade before her knees gave out, and my father took it over. Everybody in the neighborhood knew the kettle. Booth, vinyl, the color of butterscotch, a pie case by the register that hummed with cold. My father, Ray Calloway, behind the grill window, running the place the way other men run a church. The apron he handed me that first Saturday was plain white. There was a hook wall by the walk-in cooler where the aprons hung, and every hook had a strip of masking tape above it, with a name written in grease pencil. Ray, Eddie, the old line cook, 2 waitresses. My little brother Grant's hook said Grant in big proud letters. Even though Grant was 10 and had never worked a day, my hook said girl, not June, girl. My father wrote it, looked at it, and moved on to the next thing. I remember standing there thinking I would ask him to fix it, and then deciding I would earn the fix instead. That was the whole shape of my childhood, right there on a strip of masking tape, and it took me 16 more years to read it correctly. Here is the part I need you to remember, because it matters at the very end of this story. 2 weeks into that first summer, my grandmother Opal came in on a Sunday, sat in the corner booth with a coffee she never drank, and watched me bus tables for an hour. Before she left, she handed me a paper grocery bag. Inside was an apron she had sewn herself, cream-colored, with my name embroidered across the chest pocket in dark green thread. June, cursive, even stitches. Wear your name, she said. Nobody hands it to you twice. I hung it on my hook over the masking tape. My father never said a word about it, but he never took it down either. I think even he understood there are some things you don't touch in front of your own mother. The second thing you need to remember from that summer is smaller. It fits in a back pocket. At the register, the kettle sold a few odds and ends by the toothpicks, lighters, aspirin, and little green memo books. 99 cents each. I bought one with my babysitting money. And starting that first Saturday, I wrote down my hours in it. In on the left, out on the right. A line for the date. I told myself it was math practice. I told myself a lot of things back then. I want to be honest with you about why I did it. Because it is not noble. Nobody had promised to pay me. And I knew it. But some part of me, 14 years old, apron strings wrapped twice around my waist, needed the hours to exist somewhere outside my father's memory. Even then, some animal part of me knew that in my family, anything that only existed in Ray Calloway's memory belonged to Ray Calloway. So, I wrote every shift for 16 years. When I filled a green book, I bought another one for 99 cents and stacked the old one in a shoebox in my closet. You are going to hear about those green books again. Stay with me. 3 years went by like that. School during the week, the kettle on weekends, and every summer break. My hours in the green book. My name on the apron. Nobody acknowledged. And then, 13 years before the morning, I walked out. The college conversation happened. I was 17. I had the brochures fanned out on my bed, like playing cards. A state school, 2 hours north. I'd done the math on tuition. Because doing math was what I did. I knew there was a fund. Because Grandma Opal had told me there was one. Years earlier, at that corner booth, she'd tapped the table with one finger and said, "There is money set aside for you, June." I saw to it. Don't let anybody tell you different. My mother came into my room, saw the brochures, and got very still. My mother did not yell. In our house, my father was the weather, and my mother was the climate. She sat on the edge of my bed, smoothed the brochure flat with her palm, like she was petting it, and told me, in a voice soft as flannel, that the fund was gone, that the diner had had 2 hard winters, that family money goes where the family needs it, and the family had needed a new fryer line and a roof. And she paused here, and I will never forget that she had the decency to pause. Grant's tuition deposit at the Culinary Institute in Cincinnati. Grant was 14. They had already paid a deposit for a school he couldn't attend for 4 more years. For me, at 17, with acceptance letters coming, there was nothing. You have a whole restaurant to learn from, my mother said, patting the bed twice. Better than any classroom. And anyway, June, family doesn't keep score. There it is. The family motto. You are going to hear that sentence the way I heard it, over and over, at every fork in the road of my life. Always traveling in one direction. Family doesn't keep score. It took me until my 30s to understand what that sentence actually was. It wasn't a philosophy. It was an instruction. It meant, don't you keep score. Because someone in that house was absolutely keeping score. I just didn't know yet where the scorebook was kept or whose name was in it. I didn't go to college. I went full-time at the kettle the week after graduation. And here is a detail that seemed like nothing at the time. My father took me into the back office. A desk, a filing cabinet, a calendar from a meat supplier, and had me fill out paperwork, tax forms, a direct deposit form for a bank account. He said he'd opened for me. To keep it simple, I asked when I'd start seeing a paycheck. He laughed, 1 syllable, and clapped my shoulder. That is just for the books, Junie, taxes, and insurance. Real monies. A family conversation. You eat free, you live free. And one day, everything in this building comes back to you. Family doesn't keep score. I signed. I was 19. Remember the direct deposit form and the account I never saw again. Under the fluorescent light of that back office, 4 separate documents were signed in about 6 minutes, and I understood exactly one of them. That ratio, what I signed versus what I understood, is the engine of this entire story. It is also, if you can believe it, how I make my living now. But we're not there yet. 9 years before the morning, I walked out. My grandmother Opal died. I was 21. She went in October, quietly, in her sleep, in the little brick house on Marquette Street she'd lived in for 50 years. The funeral was on a Saturday morning, and the kettle stayed open, because my father said Opal would have wanted the doors open, which may be the only true thing he said that whole month. 2 things happened around that funeral. The first one, I saw. The second one, I only understood 4 years ago. And when I tell you what it was, you are going to want to go back and look at this scene again. So look carefully now. The thing I saw. The Monday after the funeral, my father drove downtown to a lawyer's office to handle the estate. He came home at 2:30 p.m., walked through the diner's back door, and he was carrying a blue folder. Legal size, heavy paper, the kind with a string clasp wound around a button. He carried it flat against his chest with one arm, the way you carry something you don't want dropped or seen. And he went straight to the back office, and I heard the filing cabinet's bottom drawer roll open and roll shut. And then I heard the small metal press of a key turning. And that was the only drawer in that office that ever, in all my years there, had a lock that got used. At the family dinner that night, I asked what Grandma had left. My father didn't look up from his plate. Debts, he said. The house had 2 mortgages on it. It was all a mess. There is nothing. And honestly, it cost us money to close it out. Don't bring it up around your mother. It upsets her. I remember thinking Grandma Opal had run a diner in the Black for a decade on her own, and had told a 17-year-old at a corner booth, "Don't let anybody tell you different." And I remember choosing to believe my father anyway, because I was 21, and because believing him was the rent I paid to belong in that family. If you've ever swallowed a question at your own dinner table because you knew the true answer would cost you your seat, you know exactly the taste I am describing. The blue folder stayed in the locked drawer. 9 years. Keep your eye on it. After that, life at the kettle settled into its long middle. And I am not going to walk you through every year of it, because the years repeated like wallpaper. But you need one more scene from the middle, because it is the scene where I almost caught them, and didn't. 5 years before the morning I walked out, I was 25, and I asked to be paid, not a raise. Paid. What I see. Paid. At all. I had picked my moment carefully. A Tuesday after close. Register counted. My father in a good mood because the month's numbers were up, and they were up because of me. By then, I wasn't just waiting tables. I did the ordering, the schedule, the vendor calls, the books before, the bookkeeper. I had trained myself into being the most useful person in that building, on the theory a child can't stop believing. That if I became indispensable, someone would finally say the word out loud. Indispensable people don't get thanked. By the way, they get used harder. Nobody tells you that at 14, I stood by the pie case with a piece of paper. On it, I had written a number, what a restaurant manager in Dayton made, straight off 3 job listings. 31,000 a year. I wasn't even asking for all of it. I asked for 800 a month. My father listened with his arms crossed, and then he did something I didn't expect. He smiled, easy, and said, "Junie, you are already on payroll. Have been for years." asked the accountant. I said, "Then where is the money, Dad?" And my mother, who had materialized from the office doorway, the way she always materialized, softly, at the exact moment her lines were due, said, "It goes back into the family, sweetheart, where you think your car insurance comes from, the roof over your head. It all comes out and goes back in. That is how a family works. Family doesn't keep score. Notice what happened there? Because I missed it for 5 more years. That was a confession. You are already on payroll. Have been for years. Money was moving through my name. Wage numbers were being reported to the government, with June Calloway printed on them. Somebody was receiving that money. It was not me. At 25, standing by the pie case, I heard it as a brush off. It was actually the whole crime, said out loud with a smile. I didn't push. I folded my little piece of paper in half, and in half again, and put it in my back pocket next to the green memo book. And I went home to the apartment above the diner that they never let me forget was free. And that night, for the first time, I wrote something in the green book that wasn't ours. At the bottom of the page, under the days in and out, I wrote one line. He says, "I am on payroll." 6 words. I want you to remember that those 6 words were sitting in a shoebox in my closet, in my own handwriting, dated 5 years before everything came apart. The most dangerous thing in my parents' lives was a 99-cent notebook, and none of us knew it yet, least of all me. Which brings us, finally, forward to the morning itself, the 0 hour of my life. My 30th birthday, a Tuesday in March, 4 years ago. Everything before this morning, you've now seen. Everything after it, you are about to. I want to give you this morning in detail, because I have replayed it maybe 1,000 times, and the details are load-bearing. 6 a.m., I unlocked the back door of the kettle, same as every Tuesday, and started the first pots of coffee. Eddie the line cook came in at 6:15 and said, "Happy birthday, June," and slid a day-old cherry turnover across the steel counter with a candle stuck in it, unlit, because Eddie was not allowed to use the lighter by the register for non-business purposes, which was a rule my father had actually made. I laughed. I ate the turnover at 6:20 in the morning, standing over a trash can, and honestly, it is one of the last purely good memories I have of that building. At 9:40 a.m., between the breakfast rush and the lunch prep, my father called me up front. He was standing at the counter, and next to him was Grant. Let me catch you up on Grant in one breath, because he only needs one. Culinary school, paid in full, finished in 4 years, came home at 23, with opinions about aioli, and for the past 2 years, the family project. The sun around which every dinner conversation orbited was Kettle 2. A second location. Grant's location, Waitay, upscale diner, exposed brick, $9 toast. My father talked about it, the way other men talk about grandsons. On the counter, my father had a stack of documents about half an inch thick, tabbed with yellow stickers, where signatures went. A bank loan, he said, for the build-out of Kettle 2. The bank wanted more names on it. Just a formality. Junie, you are management. They like to see management on the paper. Sign where the stickers are, he said, and tapped them, twice, with 2 fingers. You don't need to read it. Family doesn't keep score. I picked up the pen. I want to be honest with you. I picked up the pen. 30 years of training doesn't dissolve. Because the calendar says, you are an adult now. My hand knew the way to that signature line. The way it knew, the way to the coffee filters in the dark. And then 2 small things happened, back to back, and they saved my life. The first thing, Grant, leaning on the counter, checking his phone, said, not even unkindly, that is the part that got through. He said it the way you'd mention the weather. It is just paperwork, June. It is not like it is costing you anything. What do you even have going on? What do you even have going on? My own brother. 16 years of open to close, and the family's honest, unguarded assessment of my life was that it was empty. Not one of them, not once, had ever looked at me and seen a person with something to lose. They had seen a resource. Resources don't need to read what they sign. The second thing, because Grant's sentence had stopped my hand for a moment. My eyes were down, and they landed on the edge of a page in the middle of the stack. Not the signature page. A page under the fourth yellow tab, sticking out a 1/4 inch, further than its neighbors. And along that edge, in the header, I could read 4 words of the title, Consent of Beneficiary, and then the paper above it cut off the rest. Beneficiary. I stood there with a pen in my hand, and that word went through me like cold water through a crack. Beneficiary of what? Nobody had ever, in 30 years, used that word about me and anything. I said, I want to take these home and read them tonight. The temperature at that counter dropped 10 degrees in a second. My father's hand came down flat on the stack, not violently, deliberately, a period at the end of a sentence. The banker's coming at noon, he said. Sign it now, Junie. Don't make this a thing. Then, let me read it now. I am fast. And my father, I want you to hear this the way I heard it, because his voice did not rise at all. It went down, it went quiet and level, which in Ray Calloway was the real alarm. My father said, the day you read paperwork in my restaurant like I am some stranger trying to cheat you, is the day you tell me 16 years meant nothing to you. Is that what you are telling me on today of all days? Your mother is planning your birthday dinner right now. There it is. The whole machine, in one sentence, gears showing. My suspicion was the betrayal. His secrecy was the loyalty. Heads he wins. Tails. I am ungrateful. I looked at the stack. I looked at the 1/4 inch of page 4. I looked at my father's hand, flat on top of my name, and I heard myself say, number, 1 word. 2 letters, 30 years. I did not raise my voice. Neither did he. That is what nobody warns you about in families. Like mine, the ending, when it finally comes, is almost silent. My father lifted his hand off the papers, squared the stack against the counter, and said, take off the apron. If you are not family today, you are staff. And staff I have to pay. And I am not paying you to stand there. I want to be precise, because this sentence was the confession he never knew he made. Staff I have to pay. 16 years. And the mask slipped for exactly 5 words. He knew. It was never a misunderstanding. Never an old-fashioned man who thought family labor was just how it is done. He knew the whole time that what he had to do with staff was the thing he had chosen. Every single week for 16 years. Not to do with me. I untied Grandma Opal's apron. The cream one. My name in green thread. Washed maybe 1,000 times. Soft as an old dollar bill. I did not hang it on the hook that still, 16 years later, said girl on masking tape underneath it. I folded it, and I put it in my bag, and my father watched me do it and understood. I think, before I did, that taking the apron meant I was never coming back. I went up to the free apartment and packed 2 duffel bags in 40 minutes. Clothes. A shoebox of green memo books, 16 years of them, which I took, not because I imagined they were evidence, but because they were the only proof I existed. I had 200 and change, because you don't build savings on a salary of 0. At 11:15 a.m., I came down the back stairs. Eddie was prepping lunch. He looked at the bags, and he looked at me, and this man who had worked beside me my entire adult life reached up to the wall, pulled the masking tape that said girl off my hook, balled it up, and dropped it in the trash. He didn't say a word. Neither did I. It remains one of the kindest things anyone has ever done for me. I walked out the back door of the Copper Kettle at 11:20 in the morning on my 30th birthday. And if you are waiting for the part where I cried in the truck, not yet. That comes later, once. And when it comes, it won't be about my father at all. If you have ever walked out of somewhere with everything you own in 2 bags and a version of yourself still hanging on a hook behind you, put ghost in the comments and tell me how long it took you to stop looking back. It took me 6 weeks. And the reason it only took 6 weeks has a name, and her name is Marisol. 6 weeks after I walked out, I was hired at the Hartwell, a business hotel by the interstate, for the only opening they had. Night, auditor, 11 p.m. to 7 in the morning. Alone at the front desk, balancing the day's accounts. The manager who hired me flipped through my 1-page resume. 16 years, 1 employer, no title, no references I could use, and asked why a person leaves a family business with nothing. I said, the pay was bad. He laughed and stamped my paperwork. It was the first true joke I ever made about it. Marisol Reyes ran night housekeeping. 60 years old, reading glasses on a beaded chain, and a way of moving through a building like she was the one auditing it. She'd bring her paperwork to the front desk around 3 a.m., and for the first month, we barely spoke. Then one night, she watched me do something odd. A guest had disputed a room charge. The numbers didn't reconcile, and instead of shrugging it to the morning shift, I sat there for 2 hours and hunted it through the folios until I found it. A miskeyed digit, $41 posted to the wrong room. Marisol watched me log it, initial it, and lean back like I'd landed something. You like that, she said. Not a question. I like when the paper matches the truth, I said, and to this day I don't fully know why I kept talking. At 3 in the morning, to a woman I'd known a month, except that she listened the way you'd want to be listened to. Hands still, no fixing, no flinching. I told her all of it, the kettle, the hook, the green books in the shoebox, the payroll I was on but never touched, the stack of yellow tabs, and the 1/4 inch of a page that said consent of beneficiary. Marisol was quiet for a while. She took off the reading glasses and let them hang on the chain. And then she said the sentence I will remember for the rest of my life. Mija, a ledger only lies when somebody else is holding the pen. That was all. She gathered her paperwork and went back to her floors. But I sat at that desk until sunrise turning it over, because in 11 words she had handed me the diagnosis and the cure. Every ledger in my life, the payroll, the estate, the family's whole account of who I was and what I was worth, had been written by someone else's pen. The green books in my shoebox were the only ledger I had ever held the pen on. The problem was never that I kept score. The problem was I'd been the only honest bookkeeper in a crooked house, and I'd been keeping the books for free. So I stopped keeping other people's books for free. Here is the rebuild, and I'll give it to you fast, because you already know I survive it. You've met a woman at the beginning of this story. What matters isn't the errands. It is the transformation. Year 1, I audited the night ledgers of a 200-room hotel and taught myself, folio by folio, how money is supposed to leave a trail. Year 2, the hotel group moved me to payroll, days, a desk, and I found I had a specific talent that had a name I'd never heard. Payroll compliance, finding the gap between what a company reports and what a worker receives. Imagine discovering there is a profession, a certified, licensed, paid profession, built entirely around the crime that was your childhood. Year 3. I studied nights for the certification exams, in a studio apartment, where every stick of furniture was mine, paid for by wages that arrived. Every 2 weeks, in an account only I could touch. I passed on the first attempt. By 3 years after the morning I walked out, I was June Calloway, certified payroll auditor, and companies were paying me to hold the pen. 2 small things from those years. And then, we get to the part you've been waiting for. First, I never stopped carrying a green memo book. Habit outlives its reasons. It sat in my work bag between the calculators, and colleagues teased me about it. The auditor with the paper notebook. Let them. Second, Grandma Opal's apron hung on the back of my apartment door those whole 3 years. My name facing out. First thing I saw leaving, last thing. Some mornings I touched the stitching. Like a doorbell. I am not embarrassed to tell you that. When your name has spent 16 years on masking tape, you keep it where you can reach it. Now, 3.5 years after the morning I walked out, last spring, the whole thing cracked open, and I need you to notice that it cracked open through the most boring possible door. Not a dramatic confrontation. A routine piece of adult paperwork. Stay with me, because this is where it changes. I was buying a small condo. The lender wanted my full history, so I did what auditors do. I requested my own official earnings record from the Social Security office. The federal record of every dollar every employer has ever reported paying you. It is your record. Anyone can request their own. Mine arrived on a Thursday in a government envelope, and I opened it at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, expecting 3 tidy lines of hotel wages. The earnings letter, remember that name. The earnings letter had 11 lines I was not expecting. Starting the year I turned 19, Copper Kettle Incorporated had reported wages paid to June Calloway every single year. $19,000 a year, give or take, for 11 straight years. $19,000 a year for 11 years. $209,000 paid on paper to a person who never saw a dime of it. Let me make that number real for you. That is a starter house in Dayton, bought outright. That is every rent check of my entire adult life. Twice over, that is what my childhood was worth to somebody. Because, let me tell you what those 11 lines actually meant. In plain words, a business gets to deduct wages from its taxes. So every year, my father's accountant reported that the kettle paid me, the business took the tax break for paying me, and the money itself went into that direct deposit account he'd opened for me at 19. To keep it simple, Junie, an account I had never once seen a statement from. I was a ghost employee, the oldest trick in the payroll fraud handbook. I had spent 3 years being professionally trained, examined, and certified in detecting exactly this. And it was sitting in my own name the entire time. I did not call my father. I did not post anything. I did what I was trained to do. I took out a green memo book, and I started a file. And here is where being an auditor stops being a metaphor, because a person who finds one cooked ledger doesn't get angry. She gets thorough. If they lied about the payroll, what else was written in somebody else's pen? And there was one document I had been not thinking about for 13 years. A blue folder, a locked bottom drawer, debts. Honey, there is nothing. Don't upset your mother. Probate records, the court files from when a person's estate is settled, are public. You can walk into the county courthouse and ask. On a Tuesday morning, on a day off, I drove to Dayton, went to the records office, gave a clerk my grandmother's name and the year she died, and paid $11 for copies. I sat in my car in the courthouse parking lot with a manila envelope, and before I opened it, I said, Out loud, alone, okay. Grandma, let's see your handwriting. Inside was the estate file of Opal Calloway. And inside, that was the document my father had carried against his chest 13 years earlier. The blue folder, not lost, not debts, filed with the court, where it had been sitting in plain view for anyone who thought to look, which tells you how certain he was that I never would. It was a trust. In plain words, a set of legal instructions that says, this property is held by a caretaker for a specific person until a specific time. The property was the brick building at 112 Marquette Street. Not her house. Her other building. The old storefront she'd owned since the 70s. 2 blocks from the Kettle. The specific person the building was held for was named on page 2. And I read my own name in a lawyer's typeface. June Calloway. Granddaughter. The specific time was my 30th birthday, and the caretaker, the trustee, the one legally required to protect it for me and hand it over, was Raymond Calloway. Sit with the dates a second. Because I had to. The building became mine, fully, legally mine, on my 30th birthday. My 30th birthday was the morning of the yellow tabs. That stack of loan papers. Sign here. Don't read it. The banker's coming at noon. That was dated the exact day the building stopped being his, to control and started being mine. The consent of beneficiary page, the 1/4 inch that stopped my hand, was the page where I would have agreed to pledge my own building. As collateral, they didn't need me on that loan. Because I was management, they needed me because the collateral belonged to me. And I was the only person in the room who didn't know it. And one more page. Because the estate file had a final document. 1 page further in. And this is the only time in this story I am going to slow all the way down. It was a letter, handwritten, filed with the trust, at my grandmother's instruction. The clerk's copy was gray and a little crooked on the page, but the handwriting was hers, the same even hand that had stitched my name in green thread. June. If you are reading this the way I hope, your father gave it to you on your birthday, and you are sitting in my building, deciding what to do with it. If you are reading it any other way, then I was right to write the rest of this letter. And I am sorry. I watched them. Honey, every Sunday I sat in that corner booth, and I watched who did the work and who got the credit. And I kept my own books on it. You wore your name. You always wore your name. The building is yours, because you are the only one in that family who ever earned anything without being handed it. And a person like that needs one thing nobody can take back. Don't let anybody tell you different. Love. Your grandmother, Opal. She knew. 9 years before I walked out. She had already run the audit. Sitting in a corner booth with a coffee she never drank. My grandmother had watched the whole crooked ledger of our family, and she had done the one thing an old woman with tired knees could do about it. She wrote a true entry where they couldn't erase it, and she filed it with a court, and she waited. That is where I cried. The only time in this whole story. Alone, in a parking lot, in my car, at 10 in the morning on a Tuesday, with a photocopy shaking in my hands. Not about the money. Not about my father. I cried because for 16 years I had kept my hours in 99-cent notebooks, so that somewhere outside my father's memory, there would be a record that I existed. And it turned out that the whole time, 2 blocks away, somebody else had been keeping a record of me too. Hers. Just said what I was worth. I gave myself the drive home. To grieve. Then I parked the grief next to the anger, where I keep them both. And I finished the audit, because one question was still open. If 112 Marquette Street had been mine since my 30th birthday, who had been using it for the last 3.5 years? You already know. I want you to hear how I confirmed it anyway, because I did this the way I do everything now. By the book, in daylight. with receipts. Kettle 2 had opened about 8 months after I walked out. Exposed brick, $9 toast, Grant's name in the newspaper's dining section. I had never once driven past it, on purpose. That week, I looked up the address in the county property records, which are public, and matched it against the trust. Kettle 2's exposed brick was my brick. My brother's restaurant had spent 3 years operating inside my building. And here is the detail that turned it from a family shame into a legal case. Recorded with the county was a lease, the dollar lease. Remember that name, signed 2 months before my 30th birthday. The landlord's signature was Raymond Calloway, signing as trustee of the Opal Calloway Trust. The tenant was a company Grant had set up for the new restaurant. The rent, written out in the document in words and numbers both, was $1 per year. In plain language, for anyone who has never had the pleasure, a trustee is legally required to manage the property for the beneficiary's benefit. Mine, renting my building to his own son's business for $1 a year, is what the law calls self-dealing, and it is just about the brightest red line in the entire book. He hadn't just hidden my inheritance. He had spent 3 years quietly bleeding it into Grant's stream, 1 free month at a time, and the market rent on a commercial storefront in that neighborhood. I called 2 brokers to be sure. Was about $2,300 a month. $2,300 a month for 46 months and counting. $105,800. That is every paycheck from my first 3 years at the hotel, stacked end to end, taken a second time from a version of me who didn't even know she was being robbed. So now you are caught up to where I was last spring. 3 documents. On my kitchen table, the earnings letter, 11 years of ghost wages, the blue folder, the trust, and Grandma's letter, the dollar lease, the self-dealing, in his own signature. My whole life, cross-referenced, notarized, and public. And I want to pause on something, because this is the part of these stories where people usually do something stupid and cathartic. And I need you to understand why I didn't. I did not storm the diner. I did not post the documents. I did not call a reporter. Not because I wasn't angry. I was angrier than I have ever been in my life. A clean, cold, load-bearing anger. But I had spent 3 years learning exactly one professional lesson. And it is this: the person who loses their composure loses custody of the facts. My father's entire system had run for 30 years on the assumption that I would either stay silent or get emotional. Those were the 2 settings the family remote had for me. There was a third setting nobody had ever seen: procedural. I hired a probate attorney, a woman downtown, recommended by a colleague, glasses pushed up in her hair, who read my file in 40 minutes flat, and then looked up at me and said, "In 15 years, I have never had a client walk in with the case already assembled. What did you say you do?" I told her I audit payrolls. She said, "After this, think about law school." We laughed. Then we went to work, and everything that follows, every single step, was legal, boring, and unstoppable. That is the recipe. By the way, if you ever need it: legal, boring, unstoppable. Step 1. The attorney sent my father a letter. A formal demand, which is exactly what it sounds like. It said, in lawyer language, 4 plain things. The beneficiary knows. Produce a full accounting of the trust. Vacate or renegotiate the dollar lease at market rate, with back rent, and resign as trustee, or a court will remove you. He had 30 days. Step 2. On the payroll side, I filed the standard federal forms, the same ones I help other people's employees file, reporting wages recorded in my name that I never received. I want to be very clear, for anyone taking notes. I did not have to accuse anyone of anything. I reported facts to the tax office and let the paperwork do what paperwork does. When wages are reported but never paid, that is not a family misunderstanding. That is a false tax filing. 11 years running, and the penalties compound. 19 days of silence. Then, on day 20, my father did the thing I had been quietly counting on him to do. Because 30 years of data told me he would. He decided this was still a family matter, governed by family rules, where he held the pen. He called a meeting. Not at the attorney's office, at the Kettle. Sunday, after close. No lawyers. Junie, family talks to family. My attorney advised against it. I went anyway, with her written blessing, one recording app running legally in my pocket, in a one-party consent state, which Ohio is, because there was a version of this that needed to happen at that counter, or it wouldn't count. And I will tell you exactly what happened, because I have it word for word. 7 p.m. Sunday. The Kettle after close. Chairs up on tables. The pie case dark. My father at the counter, my mother beside him. Grant standing back by the register with his arms crossed. 3 against 1. On the counter, my father had laid out. I promise I am not inventing this. A fresh stack of papers with yellow tabs. A settlement he'd had some lawyer friend draft. He slid it across the counter with 2 fingers, 4 years to the week since the last time. And he said, "We're going to fix this like a family. Sign here. And this whole ugly thing goes away. And you are welcome back at this counter, like nothing happened. Sign here. The whole ugly thing, like nothing happened. Withing happen. Welcome back. To the counter." Even then, at the absolute end, the best future he could imagine for me was standing behind his counter. And the price of it was, one more time, my signature on his paper unread. I did not sit down. I took out one green memo book, the current one, opened it to a page where I had written 6 numbered lines, and I read them out loud, in a flat voice, the voice I use in exit meetings, when an audit is over and the findings are final. 1. The building at 112 Marquette Street has been my legal property since my 30th birthday. You have known since the day Grandma died. I have known for 11 weeks. 2. The lease you signed with Grant's company is void as self-dealing. As of the 1st of next month, the tenant pays market rate, $2,300 a month, to me, or the tenant vacates my building. 3. You owe the trust $105,800 in back rent, plus interest, and a court is going to agree. 4. The tax office has my earnings record, my sworn statement, and your 11 years of filings. That part is no longer mine to forgive. It is federal. 5. Grandma left a letter in the court file. You've never read it, because you never went back to look. She knew. Dad, she watched you from the corner booth, and she knew. And that is why the building was never yours. 6. Why all I found. You always said, family doesn't keep score. You were right. I don't keep score anymore. I keep records, and every line of mine is true. Then I closed the notebook. My mother had started crying somewhere around line 3. Soft, aimed, the flannel voice in tear form, and was saying my name in that key that had worked on me for 30 years. Grant had gone the color of the counter, and my father looked at me across that counter, and I watched the exact moment he understood that the girl from the hook was gone, and the person standing in her place did this professionally. He said, "You do this to your own family. For money." And I gave him the one cold line I had allowed myself, the only sentence in this whole affair I wrote, in advance, for pleasure. I said, "No, Dad, You did this for money. I am doing it for $1 a year. I walked out the front door this time. Left the settlement stack untouched on the counter. Yellow tabs and all. The recording ran 61 minutes, and my attorney, upon hearing it, said it was the cleanest admission timeline she'd ever gotten for free. Because my father, believing he was in a family meeting, had confirmed on tape that he'd known about the trust since the beginning. He had held the pen his entire life. He just never imagined the paper could belong to someone else. Now, the consequences. I am going to give them to you flat, in order, the way they landed, because the facts don't need my help. 4 months after that Sunday, the probate court removed Raymond Calloway as trustee. The legal term is for cause, which means the judge wrote down why and ordered what is called a surcharge, which in plain words means the trustee personally repays what his mismanagement costs. $105,800 in back rent, plus interest, plus my attorney's fees. To cover it, my parents took a mortgage out on the house I grew up in, the house that had been paid off since I was in high school. My father, who had spent 30 years telling that neighborhood he'd never owed a bank a nickel, now owes one every month, with my name on the reason. The tax office took longer because the federal government is slow, the way a glacier is slow. The kettle was audited. 11 years of corrected wage filings, back payroll taxes, penalties, and a fraud referral that my attorney tells me settled short of charges only because my parents signed everything the government put in front of them. There is a poetry in that I don't need to explain to you. And Kettle, too. The bank had approved Grant's expansion loan, with my building sitting in the collateral file. When the trust case became public record, the bank did what banks do. It reread its own paperwork, found a pledged asset the borrowers never owned, and called the loan. Grant couldn't cover market rent, and the loan both. Kettle, too, served its last $9 toast on a Sunday in January, 3 years and 2 months after it opened. Inside a building it had never paid for. He moved his equipment out by the 15th. My attorney did the walkthrough. I never set foot in it, while his sign was up. Then came the escalation, right on schedule. Because people like my parents do not go quietly. They go loudly. In your voicemail, 6 texts from my father. The week, the court ruled. A 200-word message that used the word regret 3 times, and the word wrong 0 times. It said things like this got so much bigger than it needed to, and your grandmother would be heartbroken to see the family like this. Which, given the letter in the court file, is the single funniest sentence anyone has ever sent me. My mother left voicemails in the flannel voice, then in a sharper voice when flannel expired, then showed up at my office, where the receptionist, bless her, informed her that visitors need appointments, and I watched on the lobby camera as my mother stood there, realizing she was in a building where her voice moved nothing. She stood there for a while. Then, she left. I answered. None of it. Not out of cruelty. Out of accuracy. For 30 years, every conversation with them had ended with me holding the bill. There was nothing left to say that a court and a tax office weren't already saying in writing, with deadlines. But I told you at the start this ending is better than revenge. So here is the rest of it. And here is where I put the pen down gently. Grant has a daughter. My niece. She is 7. And whatever her father is, she is none of it. She is a kid who likes pancakes and drawing horses with too many legs. 2 months after Kettle 2 closed, an envelope came to my office, addressed in careful 7-year-old letters, with a drawing of 2 people holding hands in front of what was recognizably a diner, and one of the people had my hair. Nobody put her up to it. I checked. Believe me, I audit things. Her mother, Grant's ex, had simply never told the kid we were at war, because we aren't. Kids keep the only honest books in a family. So now, one Saturday a month, my niece and I have pancakes, not at any kettle, at a diner across town where nobody knows our last name, where I tip 30%. In cash, on the table, where the waitress can see it. My niece thinks her Aunt June is a detective who catches money. I've decided that is close enough to true. And the building, 112 Marquette Street, brick, 2 blocks from my father's diner, empty from January to April. People asked if I'd sell it, and I understood the question. Clean money, clean break. But my grandmother didn't leave me an asset. She left me a corner booth's worth of patience, made solid. So in April, I leased it. Market rate, 12-page lease. Every line read out loud by both sides. Because that is the house rule now. To 2 sisters who'd been running a bakery out of a rented church kitchen for 6 years and needed their first real storefront. They open at 6 a.m. On the day they signed, the older sister asked why I'd chosen them over an offer from a franchise. I said, because you did the work for 6 years before anybody handed you anything. And I know somebody who had a policy about that. They put their names on the window in gold paint. Both names. Big. Here is where I leave you. Last month, I moved into the little office at the back of the Marquette building. The bakery sisters insisted, said the room was just sitting there. And my condo has no room for a business that is growing, because I've gone independent now. June Calloway. Payroll audits. My name is on the door, painted, not taped. On the wall above my desk, 3 things. Grandma Opal's apron, framed, my name in green thread facing out. Beside it, a photocopy of a handwritten letter, and I'll let you guess which one. And on the shelf below, a shoebox with 16 years of 99-cent memo books. Closed, retired, at rest, next to one new green book, the current one, which no longer records my hours for a man who'll never pay, but billable hours for a woman who always does. My father still says it, I hear, to the regulars, over the pie case about me. Family doesn't keep score. And after everything, I've decided he was right. Family doesn't keep score. A score is a thing you hold against somebody. What family does. What my grandmother did from a corner booth. What Marisol did at 3 a.m. What Eddie did with a balled-up strip of masking tape. What a 7-year-old does with a horse that has too many legs. Is keep a record, a true one, of who you are and what you are worth and who showed up. My family kept no record of me at all, so the people who loved me kept it instead, in green thread and courthouse files and pancakes, until the day I was ready to hold the pen myself. Wear your name. Nobody hands it to you twice. If somebody in your life has been keeping the true record of you while your family kept none, tell me about them in the comments. And if you are still the ghost on somebody's payroll, in a diner or a house or a life, hear me on this one thing. The books can be reopened. I am proof. Subscribe if you want the stories where the quiet one wins on paper, because those are the only ones I tell. Land softly, hold your own pen.